All right, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight for braving the weather. We really appreciate this good turnout, and we certainly appreciate the 6 candidates committing their time to this event that's sponsored by the Sierra Vista Area Chamber of Commerce. For those of you who don't know, I'm Phil Vega. I'm the publisher of the Sierra Vista Herald. I'm also on the Chamber of Commerce board, so that's probably the more important part of tonight's proceedings. And we're really, we have a business committee called the Business Advocacy Committee, and it was that committee that came up with the questions that we'll be posing to the candidates this evening. First off, I want to make sure that everybody turns their cell phones off, or at least puts it on buzz, so the candidate isn't disturbed in the middle of an answer. We also ask that you keep your applause and audience comments to a minimum so that everybody can hear the candidates. There is no election signage allowed inside the room tonight. I don't see anybody with that, but we have had that in the past. The candidates, how this process will work is the candidates will be given 2 minutes to present an opening statement. So that can basically cover a little biographical information, education, why they're running, how long they've lived in Sierra Vista, that kind of stuff. And then we have a question to pose, and they will be given 2 minutes to answer those questions. And we we drew the names at random, so we have a random order for that, just so we won't be going alphabetically. Otherwise, Alicia over there with Miss Ash would be getting every question first, and Mr. Wentz here would be getting every question last, so that wouldn't be very fair. And then at the end, each candidate will also be able to give a closing statement. Now we have timekeepers up here in the front who will signal when there is 30 seconds left with a yellow card. So that is that motion. And then when your time is up, you will get a red signal and a ding, meaning school is out. So, and we will cut you off too. You can't be too verbose. So, during the question and answer period, all questions are going to be posed by me. I'll pose it to the candidate who is to answer. Since there's 6 of you, if you want to have the question repeated, more than happy to repeat the question. But you all will get the same 6 questions. So Mr. Blanchard may be the first one, you may be the second, etc., all the way down through the line. The other thing is when you have an opportunity to answer the question, if you want to use part of your 2 minutes to rebut or take issue with one of the statements of one of your fellow candidates, you're more than open to do that process as well. Okay? So does anyone have any questions or concerns before we get started? One other thing I want to say is we're videotaping this thanks to the folks here at Buena High School, and the videotape will be put up on YouTube, and there'll be a link both on the Sierra Vista Chamber of Commerce website and also the Sierra Vista Herald's website. So for your friends and neighbors who may have not had a chance to see what was going on, or wanted to hear more, or maybe you want to repeat the process, you're more than welcome to go on YouTube after this is done. Okay, first off then, we are going to go in alphabetical order for an opening statement, and each candidate will have an opening statement, so we will start first of all with Alicia Ash. Alicia.
Good evening. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Chamber for having us here this evening, and also all of you in attendance who have come to hear your candidates for local office. My name is Alicia Ash. I am a proud member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I am also a proud graduate of Buena High School. And when I opened the doors and I smelled this familiar smell, I had a million flashbacks, and I just thought, how blessed am I to be here in this position, representing a generation who doesn't only believe that we can sit back and complain about the problems, but we have to be part of the solution. I believe I can be part of that solution, and I will tell you why. I started learning about the true value of local government when I was going to high school here and served on our local youth commission. It was then that I learned what city government can offer its people. And that's when I first realized how I can be of service to the people of Sierra Vista. After I graduated from high school, I didn't stop there. I went on to the Arizona State Legislature, and I learned the state government side of things. After I graduated from Arizona State University, I came back home to serve the people who I grew up with, who I came to love and know. And I did that by working in the local congressional office. I worked in constituent services and community outreach, and that is what I will continue to do as a member of the City Council. I will look for ways that I can serve the people of Sierra Vista, and I will outreach to you so I know your concerns, and I will work to resolve them to make this a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Next, Mr. Benny.
Thank you, sir. Likewise, I'd like to thank the Chamber for hosting this great event, Mr. Vega for being the MC. Most importantly, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, it's your vote that's going to decide who wins this, and hopefully tonight, 3 candidates can win your vote or earn your vote. I'm from Washington, D.C. originally. In 2001, the Army brought me to Great Fort Huachuca. When I first got here, I didn't like it. It was small, little, not used to it. I'm used to a big city. And finally, it grew on me. By 2003, I wanted to live here for the rest of my life, and my wife did it. So 2005, I left and my family stayed here. And this community took my family under their wings and supported my wife and my family while I was gone until 2007 when I returned home. So upon coming home, we bought our house that we currently live in right now. I retired from the military in 2009 and I went back to school. I graduated from Cochise College. Immediately after that, I went to Arizona State University, and I'm currently going for my MBA with an emphasis in finance from the University of Phoenix, with approximately 5 months left. The reason I'm running is, since I've been here in 2001, I gave back to the community. Like I said, I fell in love with it until I had to deploy. In falling in love with it, I did things like coaching. I joined organizations like the Huachucans, like Real Wishes, and spent my time and my family's time at events raising money for the community. After a while, I figured I needed to do more, hence running for City Council, where we need an effective leader that's forward-thinking and out front. I thank you so much for coming tonight, and I look forward to speaking to you more. Thank you.
You're next, Bob.
I'm Bob Blanchard. I was born in the Philippine Islands. My dad was an Army officer. We moved around a lot. I went to about 10 different grade schools and 4 different high schools, to include South Point in Tucson when it first opened. I graduated from Texas A&M and got a geological engineering degree, and went back and got a master's degree in civil engineering. I was last stationed at Fort Huachuca as the post engineer up there. I retired from there, went down and worked for the city for 10 years, and I was in the Public Works Department and the Inspection Department in the city, so I'm pretty familiar with the city and a lot of the people over there. I've been on the council for 16 years total, and I would like to make it an even 20. So I would appreciate you voting for me. Thank you.
You're up next, Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here this evening, braving the weather. This is an indication that you are taking an interest in the political process, and I truly appreciate that. My name is Larry Hampton. Like many individuals who end up in this community, I was initially brought here as an Army active duty member stationed in Fort Huachuca in the mid-1980s. I had the opportunity to return in 1994, and I took that opportunity. That was initially a 3-year assignment, and then I was to go back to my Washington, D.C. agency. But I like it here. I extended a couple of years, I extended a couple more, finally said, heck with it, this is home. And once I made that decision in 2000, I immediately began to immerse myself in community service activities. I am a former city council member, and prior to that, I served on at least one of these city commissions. My number one priority as we go forward is economic diversity. I'm very concerned at how dependent this community is on Fort Huachuca for its economic stability. I don't want to take away from Fort Huachuca. I want to add to that. I want to find ways, working with Economic Development Foundation, with the Chamber, with Southeast Arizona Governmental Organization, with Cochise County and our surrounding communities, to find ways to expand our economic diversity here. We are, as council members, we are your representatives. We are here to serve you. So, as I understand what your concerns are, it is our job to address those concerns to the city staff. Larry Hampton for City Council, thank you very much.
Your turn, Mr. Mount.
Well, thank you for, nice. I'm not a big microphone guy. My name is Craig Mount, by way of Houston, Texas. Just like everybody else, for the most part, I got dropped off here after I served some time in the military. You know, I've got a firm belief that if you're lucky enough to pick your home and you decide to stay and it works out for you, that's always a good thing. And my wife and I, we picked here to stay in Sierra Vista, and we've made it a career. And, you know, I was relatively young when I got out of the military. I had to go and work for a job. I was lucky to surround myself with some very good mentors who taught me a lot about life. And some of the things that I found here in this city, I found faith. We go to church out here, and it's a big part of us. We also found a home. It was our first home to buy. My first job outside of the military, and there's a lot of firsts that happened. My wife, 2 weeks after we got married, we moved to Sierra Vista. We didn't even really live together when that happened. So Sierra Vista is a home to us. Now, the reason why I'm running is I'm fearful of Sierra Vista's future. We have grown dependent on Fort Huachuca. It has become our only real viable industry that keeps everything else afloat. And those of y'all who are in the retail industry, the construction industry, the housing industry, and everywhere else, you know what that means. And you can see the indications that come up. And as this night progresses, I'm going to lay out the facts. And that's what I do really well, is I do my research, and I've got a lot of it. And we're going to lay out all the things that are symptomatic of the problems. I'm also going to show up and provide a solution that I think is very viable for Sierra Vista, and it's something that we can go with right now. It involves the Economic Development Foundation, it involves the IDA, and it involves hiring an Economic Development Manager for the city. So I hope to answer all your questions. My name is Craig Mount, and I'm your candidate for Sierra Vista City Council.
Mr. Wentz.
Hello, thanks for coming tonight. Some of you may have heard my name before. I'm a 35-year resident, third generation Sierra Vistan. My grandfather came here in 1955, so obviously I know quite a bit of history of the area. I went to Buena also, it was the old Buena, and then I went to University of Arizona and got my bachelor's degree in 1993. Again, some of you may know me already unless you're new to town. I've been politically active. Most of that was centered around a political action committee that I founded to inform voters about property tax increases, which I generally opposed. I wanted voters to be informed about those issues. That way they could make an informed decision. A lot of times people don't even know the consequence of what a ballot measure is because sometimes the language is very short on the actual ballot. So I was a political activist. Some people I know, some of those are controversial issues. And I know there may be some people in here who were on the opposite side of those issues, but I actually don't hold that against me. The world kept going, even though most of those, in the end, all of those property tax increases were defeated, but all those entities still survived. That's what I bring to the table. I know how to research, I know how to do things. I look out for taxpayers. That's one of the things, just I guess it was a natural thing that came to me, and that's something I pursued. Of course, there was no pay for that. That was all volunteer. I just did it because I thought it was right. And that's what I'm going to do on the council is I'll continue to research issues and always look for the benefit of the taxpayers and not raise people's taxes. Again, my name is Tony Wentz, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those opening statements. One thing that I didn't mention that the Business Advocacy Committee tried to focus on was business-related issues, business-oriented issues, because obviously that's what the Chamber represents, is our business community. So a lot of these questions will be business-focused, not all of them, but several of them will be. So for the first question, the first person that gets the first question is Mr. Blanchard. Okay, and if you, like I said, as we go through this, if you want me to repeat the question, just let me know. What are the top 3 business issues, not the top 3 issues overall, what are the top 3 business issues in Sierra Vista? And as a councilman, what will you do to address them? Or councilwoman?
I think one of the top issues is getting online for the city to get their website up and running so that business people can come in, ask questions, look at the site, see what the specific problems are that they want to see addressed, and know where to go to get answers. I think that's important. The second thing I think is tourism. I believe we need to do a better job trying to get people from Mexico up and buying things at our stores from our merchants here in town. And the third thing is that I believe is we need to do a better job in tourism. I mean, this is a beautiful place, but I don't know how many people back east know anything about Fort Huachuca or Sierra Vista. We need to get that word out, and particularly with some of our political people back there in Washington. Thank you.
Mr. Benning, it's your turn next.
Thank you. I'm going to start with codes. The codes aren't bad. We went back to 2006 codes for builders and developers. What I mean by codes is if you're a first-time business owner or first-time business person, going into City Hall can be daunting and can be challenging. So we have to be more sensitive with the first-time business owner or someone coming here for the first time trying to open up a business, explaining to them what the codes are, what they have to do in order to accomplish and open their doors. With that being said, the next thing is who actually to go to. Should they go to a local contractor? Should they go to or a local business person, small business development center, or an EDF, or who's going to help them? So we have to make sure on our website, on our government page, we direct first-time business owners where to go to get information. I suggest a small business development center, a director maybe in City Hall, or the actual code and the actual inspectors. And then finally, advertising. We have to get the word out about Sierra Vista. Currently, we're 44,000 strong, but daily we serve 130,000 people. If we can't get these people into restaurants, into our shopping centers, into our malls, then something's happening. We have to have a strategic marketing plan that directs them where to go and what to look for. If I come here to go to Tombstone, where's a better place to stay besides Sierra Vista? We have the nicest hotels, we have the restaurants, we have small shops, and we have small business owners that do a great job. So those would be 3 of the things I would focus on and look at. Thank you.
All right, next up, Ms. Ash.
As a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I have been committed to making myself accessible to local business owners and leaders in the local business community. And from doing this outreach, I have learned that first and foremost, I need to make myself accessible and continue to do that outreach. What I've learned is that we need a better, streamlined, open communication. When I talk to local business owners, that's the primary thing they want to see. They want to see the people who represent them out in the community, and they want to know and have confidence that they will bring back their concerns and those issues will be resolved. And I think we have something very good going for us with the Economic Development Manager. Now, it is vital, and I cannot say this enough, it is vital that our Economic Development Manager work with our private partners, such as the Sierra Vista Economic Development Foundation, the Small Business Development Center, SEGO, just to name a few. And if we can do that, if we can have that person as a point person to bring back concerns of our local businesses, we can begin to see issues resolved. Something else that I'd like to see set up, headed by the Economic Development Manager, is focus groups. focused on very specific issues such as business codes, such as internal processes, so that the City Council can act on issues that are prohibitive and that may be causing businesses to close their doors. Now is the time to act. Now is the time for leadership, and I believe we have set that in motion. Thank you.
Mr. Wentz.
Well, if you're running a business, one of your concerns is, do you have enough customers to have a successful business? So, as we all are aware, we have a population decline here in the area. That would be a business issue. You need customers, and generally you need a growing base to have a successful business. So that's a concern, obviously, that we all have to contend with. Now, we don't have a whole lot of control, perhaps, with the Fort Huachuca issue, and a lot of that being out of our hands. But we can address that in other ways to help attract businesses. And that is keeping our tax as low as possible for businesses in order to start a business. Maybe people who start a new business, we can even make the business license even less. I mean, I know they did just reduce it, but maybe we can go down to $20 for those wanting to start a new business. Make it as easy as possible for people to start a new business. Keeping the taxes low, avoiding the hidden taxes. That was another concern we had just 2 years ago. We had the new hidden tax on our electric bills. You have 2 new lines, total of 4%. Those lines weren't on there 2 years ago. And I know that was a kind of a controversial issue. Was it 2%? Was it 4%? But it's easier to look at it now in hindsight. I tried to educate the public on that one. I held my own forum. Some wanted to just call it 2%, but the effect is it really was 4%. If you go get a bill from 2 years ago, you got 2% now and another 2% line. Neither of those lines existed. So things like that, hidden taxes. I mean, an electric bill can be a major part of a company's business or a small business. It doesn't even have to be a big company. And that's the other thing I was going to say is we need to encourage small businesses. Corporations, I mean, they have their own research staff. They know if this town's viable or not to open a business. I mean, I know many years ago we all talked about a Red Lobster, but they know they won't be viable here because they need that population base in order to have that business successful. So those are things that I would emphasize, is keeping the tax base cost low for the businesses, keep taxes low, and avoid those hidden taxes. Thank you.
Mr. Hampton, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Actually, this dovetails very nicely with my opening statement about diversifying our economy away from Fort Huachuca. So I think that would be one of the top concerns, is looking for new areas of business lines that we can bring into Sierra Vista and maintaining and expanding our current businesses. Now, to support that would be my number 2 point. There are 4 areas that we need to ensure that we really strengthen in order to help that diversity. One would be infrastructure, making sure that we have a good transportation infrastructure, our roads, bus system. One would be a communications infrastructure. It would be, gosh, terrific if we could get Sierra Vista to be one of the Google Fiber experimental communities. We really need some good high-speed internet connectivity. Energy, we need to make sure that we have sufficient energy, water, other utilities. And then, aside from infrastructure, we need to look at education to make sure that we have a trained workforce and good schools for the children of the employees. We need a good healthcare system, which I think we're doing a very good job at, and quality of life is another key issue in order to help diversify that economy. The third point that I want to bring up, and actually there are several others, but the third I'd like to just pile on with Mr. Binion here. I think it's very important that we work with the business community to make sure that the building and development codes are appropriate for this community. We need to look at covariances if it's applicable to attract or expand and do business, and we need to look at tax incentives, short-term tax incentives if that's appropriate. Thank you.
And Mr. Mount?
So the 3 things, there's several things we need to clean up, but the top 3 that are clearly on my mind, and I've probably done more research on this than any of these other candidates, and I'm very proud of that. I've actually had an economic plan about 70,000 words posted online for the last 8 months, and it hasn't shifted much. The biggest problem that we have, and this isn't just my idea, but Robert Carrera from Cochise College actually agrees with me when he says the biggest challenge facing citizens of Sierra Vista isn't the lack of job growth, it's the lack of clear economic vision and strategic planning. and that's a direct accountability statement to the leaders that we have currently in this city. So the first thing that we have a problem with is the lack of economic strategic vision. The second thing is the upcoming loss of disposable income. We're going to lose 2,700 jobs on that post, and the average income is $70,000. But we can have all the $10 jobs we want, but you'll need about 9,000 of them to make up that loss of income. And that's going to affect everything from retail, housing, construction, and you go on right down the line. And then the third one is going to be the lack of a viable industry to fall back on to replace the job cuts at Fort Huachuca. And that's something that I focused quite a bit on. So let's get down to the solutions. The first one is to fix the strategy. We need new leaders. Elections are about accountability. That's what it comes down to. We need people who are innovative and creative. One of the things that I focused on was a thing called economic gardening. Economic gardening is a process that was put into place in Colorado, Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi, Oregon, places that got creamed during the 2008 meltdown of the economy, and they have bounced back. The other thing is really build up and build an industry around our core competencies: data, communications, technology innovation, and start looking for these second-tier companies that we can bring in and headquarter here in Sierra Vista. A headquartered company in Sierra Vista keeps money local, and then it allows us to grow from within and stabilize our local industry. And the last one is really focus on our trade zones and things that we can look at. Stronger external markets where our local businesses, we can teach them how to focus on our external markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mount. Okay, the next question deals with a couple of recent hot topics that have been before the council and in the last year, and two of them were King's Court and the lighted digital signs. So please tell us what your position is on King's Court and the digital signage that was recently adopted. And the first person to answer that would be Mr. Benning.
Thank you, sir. I'll start with King's Court. It's viable in Sierra Vista and any locale to have open spaces. Driving around, there's the size of Patchy. There's 2 tennis courts in Sierra Vista for people to play tennis with. I sat and I talked to the Tennis Association, and I also talked to developers and owners of the land next to it that want to develop a veteran-centric apartment complex for veterans, for disabled veterans, but want to utilize and keep King's Court and add a park to it. I think this is a viable idea and a viable way to go for King's Court. I think we get a win-win in both situations. Either way, I think the city needs to get rid of it. I think once it goes on the ballot, the people will speak, and the city doesn't need to own it. It was a blessing that we shouldn't have received when we received it. Moving on to signage. While I don't like digital signs or any signs to begin with, I understand the need for businesses to advertise. They have to get their message out there. I drive by Buena High School sign every day when I drop my daughter off at school and pick her up. And it's actually kind of interesting. There's neat stuff on there. Do we need that at every business? No, but every business isn't going to have that. I agree with the task force that came up with the resolutions and what they believe in and what they feel we should be able to incorporate into our city. And I think those will do good. It will save our dark skies, and it will meet everyone in the middle. Our businesses will be able to advertise, and our dark skies and everything else will stay the same. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Ash, it's up to you. You're next.
Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to touch on King's Court. Those tennis courts do truly provide a quality of life. They do have economic value here in Sierra Vista. When you talk to business owners, you talk to people who want to bring business here, you talk to people at the hospital who want to bring new doctors here, that is something that they do consider. When businesses want to come here, they want activities, they want services for their families. And so I think that is an asset to the city. However, we need to make sure that having those tennis courts under our belt is not a burden to the taxpayers. I understand that the South 6 courts do have economic value and they are an asset, because if we were to build 6 courts of that standard, we would be underwater. And so keeping those South 6 courts open is a viable option because it's good for the taxpayer and it's good for city services here in Sierra Vista. What we do with the rest of the building, we will have to see when the voters vote on that in November. When the voters vote in November, you will tell us whether or not we have permission to sell it or whether we don't. And I need to emphasize that that solely gives us the permission. Do we need to go out and spend $1 million for upkeep on that building? No. But if we can figure out a strategic way that's good for the taxpayers slowly, we can do something. And when it comes to digital signs, I think the city did it right. And I believe we need more task forces that engage local business owners and other stakeholders from the environmental community as well, so we can come up with a solution that's in between. Is everybody always going to be happy? No. But in this time when we are extremely focused on economic development and economic diversity, it is important that we don't just take one side of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wentz, you're up.
Okay, well, as far as King's Court goes, I'm going to be a voter just like anybody else here. One vote, depends on what the actual ballot language reads. To me, I understand it's going to give the permission to sell. If that's just a complete blank check, I won't vote to do that because I don't necessarily have faith in the system to see that money, which could be $500,000, maybe even $1 million, I don't have faith in the current people that are running the city that they'll spend that money appropriately. So I don't like the idea of the blank check part to that, and that's going to be remains to be seen once the actual ballot language is presented and what we are going to actually authorize. So I mean, that's going to take a little, probably another month. I think they'll be finalizing the ballot language for that. So but I won't vote for it if it's going to allow just a blank check. As far as I do agree that the tennis courts could probably be salvaged for it. We definitely don't want to keep the old buildings. We don't have the money to be getting into that kind of business. I mean, a gift was great, but you know, there's always some pros and cons for something like that. As for the LED digital signs and things like that, there again, you could probably allow the signs with some kind of moderate control. Maybe we just turn them off at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I mean, a lot of businesses, restaurants especially, they close early. I remember when Long John Silver's used to be in town, they closed at 9 o'clock at night, which I thought was kind of early, but they did. It probably wasn't worthwhile for them to stay open much later. So, you know, if they're going to be on, they may be only on for a few hours depending on the time of year. So I mean, I think that's a reasonable compromise. It saves energy as well. You don't necessarily need to burn them 24 hours a day. I mean, we are still, you know, a lot of people, they go to bed fairly early here. I mean, look at the streets after 8 o'clock at night. Thank you.
Mr. Hampton, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I'm going to start with the lighted digital signs first. Let me start out by saying I am a strong supporter of the National Dark Skies Initiative. I have worked with our local astronomer club in Mr. Gent on issues related to dark sky, lightings for the parks, lighting in parking lots, etc. Having said that, I believe that there can be a reasonable compromise with digital signs. Those compromises can be in terms of working with the local astronomer club, in terms of the size of the sign, the height of it, the intensity, the frequency spectrum that is used. It doesn't necessarily have to be multi-spectrum. If we keep it to a single spectrum, like we have, for instance, at the high school and at Windermere, I have spoken with our astronomers and they agree that would not impact our dark skies very much. So I believe that there is a good compromise and it will be appropriate for some businesses to have lighted digital signs. Now, as far as King's Court, like you've heard now from many of the candidates, there are 12 tennis courts there. 6 of them on the north side are not in very good condition, but the 6 on the south side are. I would be in favor of some type of solution where we could keep those 6 courts in operation, whether the city owns them or whether some other entity takes that over. I think trying to maintain the buildings is not viable, and I would be willing to support a compromise where somebody takes over the operations of that facility, either through a lease program or buying it outright. And in that case, I think it's important that the citizens do vote to support the option to sell. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to do it, but it would be appropriate for the city to have the option to sell it if that becomes the best solution. Thank you.
And Mr. Mount?
And I agree with Tony Wentz. Nobody should eat Long John Silver's after 9 o'clock. It's not very good. You know, I kind of anticipated some of these questions, and these are actually very similar questions to what were asked for our interviews with the Herald that are coming up. So I'm just going to kind of paraphrase what I'm going to be sending to the paper anyways. That way, you know, everything's kind of on the up and up. I think the biggest thing is I agree with what most of the candidates have said. Me personally, I'm going to vote to sell it, put it up for sale. I don't think that it's worthwhile to bring it up to code. It's going to cost too much. But I don't think that the economic market is going to support the sale of this thing as is. So, you know, the most viable alternative is going to be to probably salvage the 6 courts, demolish the rest of the building, put in a park that doesn't cost a lot of money, you know, put some sand down in a fence and make it another dog park. That to me sounds fine, but keep the other courts because people do want them, and there's that. But I think the real big key here is it goes back to what was said, you know, what I said earlier, which is what's the strategic vision for the city economically? And how much resources are we wasting having a discussion about a donation that we never should have accepted to begin with? So in the future, I won't vote to accept this if I get elected to the council. Stuff like this, it's a distraction. It's going to end up getting voted down by the crowd anyways, the public anyways at the election. As far as the digital signs go, you know, the actual textbook definition for value is what you're willing to pay for something. And you know, we've got to decide as a community, do we want dark skies or do we want viable businesses that can operate at certain times? Personally, I think the technology, like Mr. Hampton was alluding to, will allow us to negotiate a fine center to that. Me personally, I will side more towards the businesses. We need to have businesses, we all have to make money, and we have to be able to pay our bills. And we can't do that when we're out looking at the stars as much as I'd love to, but we got to focus on the businesses too. Thank you.
Somebody's phone is Take a second here, Bob. Okay, Mr. Blanchard, you're up next.
Okay. Lighted digital signs, I'm not for them at all. That takes care of that. So we go to King's Court. I think it's the proper thing to do to go out to get a vote, and I think the vote will give us permission to sell King's Court. But that just gives us an option. I'm not sure that I'm in favor of doing it because recently the city manager has asked the staff to come up with a plan to put a park over there because we do not have a park in that area, along with the tennis courts. Tear down the building's no good, and that may take some time. But then to convert the other part to a park. And I have not seen any plan coming out of them yet, so I can't tell you whether I'm in favor of what they're going to come up with or not. But I think that's a good plan to keep the King's Court facility in total, but just to make it into a park and keep the existing tennis courts that are there. And that's what I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we go to question 3. Another, and as it was already mentioned with some of your answers, the other 2 kind of hot topics that have been going on in the community is economic development and the focus thereof and what the city is doing. And then also environmental issues. Several court cases and other things have been making the news regarding water usage and what the city is or isn't doing regarding that. So those 2 is the next question on what your positions are as to what the city should do. And the first person is directed to Ms. Ash.
When it comes to economic diversity, action and leadership is what the city needs to focus on now. And let me make this very clear. The city should be focused on economic diversity regardless of whether or not Fort Huachuca is facing 2,700 cuts. It is time that we become less dependent on the federal government, who can sometimes sway to fickle winds, as we have seen with Fort Huachuca. With sequestration. It is vital that we continue to work with our partners, such as the Economic Development Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, SEGO, the Cochise College Small Business Development Center, among others. The city has taken steps to begin to make our community more economic diverse, and that is hiring an economic development manager. This was a position endorsed by the Chamber of Commerce, but again, it is very important that we make sure the steps that we take are not fractured, that we are all marching together. And if we can do that, we can ensure that our recruitment, Our economic development marketing, our retention and expansion efforts are to the point where it has not been before. When it comes to environmental issues, as leaders in the community, we have to be very careful the way we define our water issues. What I can tell you is that we need to begin with more education, and that's working with the Cochise Water Project, WaterWise, as well as other education programs here in Sierra Vista. Now, we cannot bury our heads in the sand and pretend that this is not an issue, because it is. And when businesses see articles in the Sierra Vista Herald that say that a water adequacy certificate was rejected, and we know that Fort Huachuca is considering the deficit that we are pumping, that is an issue we need to deal with. Thank you.
Mr. Wentz, you're up.
Could you please repeat the question, how you have it framed there, please?
Two other major issues that have been touched upon in part were economic development and then also environmental water issues and what the city is doing and what direction you think the city should be taking as far as economic development and water issues.
Okay, well, yes, we did touch on this a little earlier about economic development, basically trying to bring new businesses to town to make up for the losses at Fort Huachuca. And that's a big dilemma for a city like ours. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other cities, you know, at least not nearby here, that depend so much on federal spending, military spending, and that's in control of people that aren't local. So we're just kind of, we're a subsequence of actions that are going on in Washington, D.C. And they don't necessarily care about us sometimes. They don't, you know, they go by it's a big bureaucracy in D.C. and we'll just be another place that'll have a local depression for a while, which has happened to places where they do actually have closed bases. So yes, we do, and that's going to be significant, because I mean, if we can't control that, it's just going to get worse here. That's just only going to lead to the population decline. And hopefully it doesn't get worse. I mean, hopefully a lot of this is just talk, political talk, because, you know, we have 2 more years with the current administration in Washington, D.C. that's leading the military and the budget spending and things like that. So, I mean, hopefully we can last another 2 years and we won't get this kind of cuts. And these proposed cuts won't actually take effect. But that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. I mean, that is bad press in the newspaper, but that's reality. We can't change reality. I mean, if there's a water adequacy dispute, if there's cutbacks potentially with the federal government, then that's the reality of the situation. And that's bad news. Now, the city, as I said, can do its part as best it can by having less taxes, less regulations, and encourage small businesses, at least, for those people who are, you know, can have an idea and open a business they think they can make a profit on.
Mr. Hampton, you're up.
Thank you. Well, some of these issues we could talk for a couple hours, so condensing down into a couple of minutes is going to be really tough. Let me just say that I believe the city, unlike in years past, the realization has come around that the city does have a role to play in economic development in the city. I believe the primary role they can play is to develop an overarching strategy that can be used by all of our partners, to include Fort Huachuca, the Economic Development Foundation, Chamber of Commerce, SEGO, Small Business Center, and many other players in this area, Cochise County, for instance. The city has already begun to make a start with that by hiring an economic development manager, by developing a plan for prosperity. This begins that process of outlining an overarching strategy that can be applied to some of our partners. Moving on to the environmental issue, I am a pretty strong environmentalist. When I was on the council before, I served as the council liaison to the Economic Environmental Affairs Commission at my choice. This is an area where I have a great deal of interest. I believe Fort Huachuca, City of Sierra Vista, Cochise County, Huachuca City have done a tremendous job, especially in water conservation, as well as in energy and some other areas. This is served as well. In fact, some of these projects have served as a model for other cities around the country. Fort Huachuca's Environmental Operations Park was given a national award recognized for the terrific job that does in recharging water into our system. So I think we're doing a pretty good job, and I believe we will continue to do so in the future.
Mr. Brown?
Just a couple quick questions. Who is the new economic development manager? Because they offered that position and the person turned it down. We don't have one.
We have an interim.
We have an interim that works part-time for us who hasn't brought anything in. So let's take a look at what we're doing. Yeah, I do agree that at some level we have to have a strategy, but here's the problem. We already paid for a strategy. We already paid for a consultant to come in early 2013. They laid out exactly what needed to happen, and the problem is the plan isn't being followed. So we went out and we hired an economic development manager. They worked 4 months and they quit. Then we waited a while, we found an interim one, and we started looking for another one. We offered the job to another one, and that person turned it down instead of accepting it. And then along the way, we lost the EDF. So look, if we think that we have an economic development plan that's working, then I would like to see what failure looks like, because that would be catastrophic. But I do think that the plan that is in place, if it's executed, would actually be very viable. I believe that the synergy that would exist between an economic development manager for the city, who's focusing on internal locus of control of business, and then other organizations like the EDF, the IDA, some of these other ones, they're looking to bring in some of these other businesses, would be very valuable for what we're trying to do. But let's not kid ourselves. We already wrote the check. The thing is we haven't actually delivered. As a matter of fact, in June 29, we approved $203,000 of your money for economic development. Now, to get to the one part with the, excuse me, what is it, the court. This is a lawsuit filed all the way back in 1995 by the Center of Biological Diversity. This has been going on for 25, 30 years. And so I think we just need to start deciding what side of the fence are we going to sit on in this little fight. Because when you look through this, these people want to run us out. It says it's dependent population locally. They're talking about us, our Killing River, and they want to shut everything down. Okay.
You're right, it's a long question for only 2 minutes. Mr. Blanchard.
Yes, I'll hit economic development first. Ms. Hollis and I were talking about that just before the meeting, and it's critical that the city and EDF gets together and plans things together so that we're both helping each other with the economic development. And I think their plan also to go into Cochise County and some of the other cities is a very good plan. Water issues. As I said, I'm a geological engineer. I've been looking at water issues. I've been up and studying all the wells that are in this area. I took all the reports, went up to Phoenix and got them, and wrote a report about 13 years ago. But we don't have a real water issue. It's a bogus issue put on us. If you look at our well levels, they cycle, but normally it's because we have a drought that causes the well to go down maybe a couple of feet. It comes back up normally when we have a rainfall like we had today. We don't have an issue like Tucson has, where they went down something like over 100 feet in their well levels. So I see no water issue there.
Okay, and then Mr. Benning.
Thank you, sir. We'll start with economic development. They actually go hand in hand, so let's start with economic development. Since the beginning, I've been against the economic development manager. You don't clean house by bringing someone into your house. You bring someone outside of the organization in to clean your house. We have people like that. We have two organizations right now, one focused on future and one focused on retention. The Economic Development Foundation, I got to hear a speech and a presentation last night that was amazing. I wish the entire city could have came out there and watched Ms. Hollis deliver what Economic Development Foundation is doing. It got so good, and I have to quote someone I really respect. Mr. Reardon says, we need to start now and we need to sit down and talk. It's the first time I heard something like that. The EDF is doing amazing things. And they're nationally renowned. People know who they are. Why bring someone in who has to set up Arizona connections, Arizona ties. We have that with the EDF. Let's talk about retention. My God, we have that too. We have the Small Business Development Center. Mark is doing an amazing job with the SBDC. They can handle retention. They handle retail. They handle our businesses we already have here in Sierra Vista. Together, we're prospering. We talk about diversity so far. I haven't said diversity. We're diversified. We got to keep going. And I think we started that last night at the working session. But we have it. We have companies here, Northrop Grumman, who's not associated with Fort Huachuca, brings in $37 billion a year, annual salaries. Now, for King's Court, very quick, for the court issue, tribute, I would have voted yes. City Council does not pick winners or losers. The water adequacy table was approved. So all we had to do was, or all they had to do was vote on letting them build or not letting them build. That's it. City Council doesn't pick winners or losers. Thank you.
Okay, the next question. The city does a lot of purchasing, has a lot of money in their budget to buy local goods and services. Under what circumstances should the city be purchasing or not, or out shopping locally? Purchasing locally or out shopping? Mr. Wentz, first question for you. This question's for you.
Okay, well, to my understanding, I mean, if it's over a certain amount, I'm not exactly sure what that is right offhand, but if it's over a certain amount, it has to go to competitive bidding. So that's the process. Hopefully a local business could give a competitive bid and win the bid. That would be the preference. Now, if it's, obviously it's taxpayers' money, we don't want to just squander it for the sake of buying it locally if it's some outrageously inflated price. I mean, I understand the benefit, but on the other hand, that's kind of crony capitalism. If you're just picking somebody because they happen to be local, that's the whole purpose of competitive bidding. So I think it's obviously going to depend what the particular situation is, but in general, I would support getting the product that's as cheap as possible, that does the job, and taxpayers get the most money, and we can buy other things that are needed. I mean, that's taxpayers' money. We just can't buy it for the sake of saying it helps locally, even though, you know, we want to help the local economy. We just hope businesses can give their own competitive bid. Thank you.
Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. When I was on the council before, I was a strong supporter of some initiatives to try to get the city to contract locally, buy locally. However, there are some state laws that restrict our ability to do that, and at the time I left the council, we were looking at ways that perhaps we could get some of those laws changed to allow more flexibility in the way that cities are able to service their contracts and make purchases. Now, one of the things that the city is doing to save the taxpayer money is they have entered into numerous intergovernmental agreements with other government agencies here in the state, and even some organizations outside of the state. And what happens there is, by entering into these multi-party intergovernmental agreements, that allows all of the participants to make purchases at a reduced price, and therefore that will help us save taxpayer money. Now, in some instances, that means that the purchases are being made outside of the city. On the other hand, many of those are for large items that we couldn't acquire here anyway, like the buses in our transportation systems, police vehicles, city vehicles, and things like that. But my focus is, if I'm going to get elected to the council again, is to continue to pursue this and enable the city to more closely purchase items, enter into contracts with local businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Mount.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think that the taxpayers' dollar should always be protected. It's kind of been the cornerstone of my platform since the very beginning. It's something that I have quite a bit of education in, and it's basically finding ways to streamline and reduce waste that goes on within organizations. Now, with that being said, there's a ton of legal matters that do get in the way of those processes, but that's why you have a council. It's to work through it. I don't think that there's been anything really in the way of the council taking measures before in the past. You know, one of the things that I do pretty well is I crunch numbers, and over the last 6 years, we've passed 99.5% of all of our resolutions and ordinances. So I'm not quite sure if there was anything that was being brought up in work sessions, but I've read pretty much all the minutes and put those down, and I didn't see that debate taking place that Mr. Hampton's referring to. What I do think, though, is that we have to protect tax dollars. I don't think that the budget is really where we should be aiming our spending. I think it's got to be off the revenue that we raise. The budget is just a cap. That's the way it works within our city. It's really about the amount of money that we can raise. That should be about what we can spend. And I do agree with the intergovernmental agreements. However, the way that it works mathematically is we do have what's called shadow inflation. It's an economic term where we can enter into all the all the intergovernmental agreements we want, but we're not paying as much, we're also not getting as much. So there's an efficiency part that we do gain, but we are going to lose some of the effectiveness. So we have to be kind of careful on what we think we're getting into. And again, if anybody wants to see it, here is the voting record for the last 6 years of everything that the council's voted on, and there is a ton of intergovernmental agreements on here, and I guarantee you they're not all saving us a lot of money. There's some diminishing returns that goes into this.
Mr. Blanchard, you're next.
I agree with Larry on the intergovernmental agreements. I think they're very good for the city. We have them with not only other government agencies, but with other cities. And I do believe it saves us money. The city purchasing department, I think, does a tremendous job. And I frankly think that we're doing as best we can, and I'm convinced that financially we're in better shape than any city in the state, and I think we're probably one of the few cities that has taken money and put it in reserve this year, where most other cities have been taking money out of their reserve. So I think financially the city is in as good a shape as any city in the state.
Mr. Benning.
Thank you, sir. Kind of hard to add on and be different. I agree in intergovernmental agreements, intercity agreements, any way to bring cost to the taxpayer down. Tax for products, tax price for goods. The problem we run into is when to go local, when not to go local. I have a campaign going on now online where I try to encourage people to shop local, to buy local. But every now and then we have to go to Walmart. Everyone here has been to Walmart. We have to go to a big chain or outside your city to get things done. I'm going to use the hospital. It's not my world. I drive by the hospital every day. It's going great if you're on the hospital board. Jadu is the contractor doing the hospital because it's a $1 billion project. We just don't have the equipment here. We don't have the things here. So I don't know who said buses. If I need to buy buses for Vista Transfer, I need to buy equipment for the police department, I have to go outside of Sierra Vista. So that's where the intergovernmental agreements come in. That's where the bidding awards come in. Legally, we have to put the bid out there. We have to put the contracts out there. So depending on the situation, depends on what we can and can't do. Thank you.
Ms. Ash?
If Sierra Vista is serious about economic development and diversifying our economy, we have to lead by example in shopping local. Plain and simple. We have to do it as much as possible, and we have to keep in mind your taxpayer dollars. We have to ensure that if there are ways to cut spending, we need to cut spending. If there are ways we need to be more efficient and effective, we need to be. Just like local businesses that are members of the Chamber of Commerce. Again, we should shop local as much as possible, just as I've been committed to, just as many of you have been committed to, if we are truly serious about diversifying our local economy.
All right. Thank you. The next question has to do with, as we all know, the amount of revenue coming from the state and federal government is shrinking, and also locally our sales tax collections have been going down. What solutions would you use to maintain the current level of city services, or perhaps you don't want to maintain the current level of city services? First goes to Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. As you pointed out, especially since the economic downturn of 2008, the city of Sierra Vista has taken some significant revenue hits. One of those in particular was the highway user revenue funds. When the state found itself nearly going bankrupt in the early part of the economic downturn, one of the things they did was sweep those funds away from the cities. That put a huge stress on a city's ability to maintain its roads and streets. In the last few years, once the state economy has begun to recover, they have returned some of that money, not all that we had before. And the other thing that's happening here is those highway user revenue funds are generated from the gasoline sales, the taxes that we get from those. Gasoline sales have been going down in this state for a couple of reasons. One is, again, because of the economic downturn, people were not traveling as much. Another interesting thing is, and again, I'm all in favor of environmental concerns, but vehicles have become much more efficient and actually are reducing the amount of gasoline that's being sold in the state. So again, that's impacting our highway user revenue funds. There are other areas also. Our transportation fund used to be lottery-assisted transportation fund. That's been swept from us. The federal government's indicated we'll be getting less in our community development block grants than we've had before. This is putting a great deal of stress on our ability to maintain the same level of service. I'm not sure we can maintain the same level of service. We have in fact cut back on how frequently our washes get cleaned out, for instance. The city has reduced its spending by about $15 million from where we were in the days before the economic downturn. They've done that in a number of ways with efficiencies through redevelopment, reorganization, and technology.
Mr. Mount.
Yeah, just a couple quick notes. This is from the the Economic Outlook Seminar. And I kind of don't agree with the idea that our city's doing better than any other city in Arizona, considering that we lost 2,000 jobs last year. Construction jobs are 61% gone. Current unemployment rate is 7.5. Retail sales have fallen every year since 2008, with a minor exception, and they've been down this year. Our home sales have dropped 50% over the last couple years. Our home values, one of the reasons why I'm running, and I know a lot of people who are supporting me are helping me along, is our home values have decreased by 35% from the average 217 to 142. We are not doing well, and to sit there and say that is not true. And I say that with as much respect as I can garner. Now, as far as the state shared revenues, what we've done is we've run into the brick wall. And what we have is we have a shell game being played where you have cities just like ours that are relying too much on state grants. And they pay a match, but that's money that's being drawn from the state. And the state's having to start to shift money around to cover other costs. That's going on across the board. There's only one real, and let me kind of go back to the efficiency question. It's called stealth inflation. Yes, our taxes may not have moved. They may have stayed the same, but you're already getting less services. Look, we've got 75 positions across the city that aren't filled. There's no way you can be 100%. So if you're paying the same amount of taxes and you're getting less service, you're still taking a loss. A lot of people don't realize it, but that's kind of how it works. Now, the other problem is, well, let me go back to the solution. The only solution that's going to work is we have to start executing the plan that's on the table and start building a new industry. We have to start building $70,000 a year jobs, and we have to start doing it right now because we haven't done it in the past, and we keep saying we have, or we keep saying we're going to do all this other stuff. You elect me, that'll be my priority. I will start making $70,000 a year jobs in this city. That's what we have to do.
Thank you. Mr. Blanchard, you're next.
Yes. On city services, over the last 3 years, we've had a drop of over 50 people. But most of that has been made up by the city workforce, I think. I mean, they've come together, they've done things more efficiently, and they just have been able to do things at a much more efficient level. The street maintenance, fortunately, for Wilcox, Fry, 7th Street, we got all those streets done with federal dollars, of which we paid about 6% of the total cost. That has taken three major streets in Sierra Vista that are good for the next 20 years. So I commend the city on getting those grants and being able to do that work, because those grants are drying up and we're not going to get near what we had before. Thank you.
Mr. Benny?
Thank you, sir. We have to understand, Arizona's 49th in recovery from the recession. We're one of the 2 states that can't recover from this recession 5 years into it. So it's going to trickle down, that whole trickle-down effect. Sierra Vista's feeling that. To add on top of that, our gas taxes are going to our state to balance the budget when it should be coming back to us. This is money we pay in. We pay to use and to get back. So let's understand where our money's going. It's not back to us. It's to the state and not to your local school, your local road, and that's why you still have potholes and you have lights that don't work. But what we can do and what we need to do, state legislators, and legislators at all levels, from city on up to state legislators, need to start working together. We need to figure out this problem and communicate with each other. We have representatives here that take care of other counties and other districts instead of ours. We need to have a communication sit down where we have each representative a phone call away where we need something we can talk to them. Instead of trickling down, we can trickle up. It works just as easy. I agree we need to build jobs, and they're coming. We need the FAA to get off their 4th point of contact and approve us so we can bring the aerospace and defense industry, because we want to talk about industries, which is waiting in the wings to bring approximately $561 million annually, by the year 2017, to Sierra Vista or to Cochise County. We need to start working in lockstep with all our legislators, not in an individual bubble at our city, individual bubble with 3 representatives for the county and 2 representatives for the district. We need to work together from ground to the top. Thank you.
Ms. Ash?
The city should always look for ways that we can trim fat in our budget. Again, just like any business, we need to look for efficiencies, and that is one of my priorities. Looking for efficiencies, looking for ways that the city can leverage technology to have a less burdensome, tax problems for you. Now, when it comes to the next part of the question, this is why it's so important for us to work to protect Fort Huachuca and also to work to diversify our economy. When it comes to protecting Fort Huachuca, we are at risk for losing 2,700 jobs. And although that is a worst case scenario, my eyes are open to any cut to our workforce. And that is why I have been committed, as William has mentioned, to working with our state delegation who represents us at our state capitol, as well as working with our congressional delegation who represents us in Washington. And again, to clarify on our economic development manager, we have to work still to figure out how we can make sure that person works together with our Sierra Vista Economic Development Foundation, with our Chamber of Commerce, as well as with other partners in our community, so that we can work in lockstep, so that we ensure that our initiatives and things that we do to protect our economy are not fractured. Thank you.
Mr. Wentz?
Okay, well, you discussed basically what I would consider the past in declining revenues in terms of sales tax and some state revenues. The current fiscal budget that just started, 2015, is projected to actually have us with an increase of 5% in sales taxes, so maybe we've turned the corner. And of course, that's just the projection. Apparently that was just approved by the City Council. It's also projecting a 6% increase in state shared revenues. So again, maybe we've turned the corner as far as the decline went in some categories. Now, I know we all know the housing market here is terrible right now with the declining revenues, sales prices there, I mean. So as far as the question goes, I think we might have turned the corner there. The Highway User Revenue Fund, again, it isn't like we're not getting anything. I don't know why they used that as a ploy to raise your electric tax 2 years ago. This year they're projected to get $7.7 million from that fund. That's what's in the current budget, and that's what they'll be allowed to spend, assuming that all comes in based on the projected revenues. And we must presume that they know what they're talking about, because that's the budget that was adopted. So I think hopefully in that department, things will be a little more positive based on those statistics. Thank you.
Okay, our final question for the evening. The Chamber of Commerce represents well over 600 individuals and businesses in the community, and they employ thousands of people in our community. So the chamber would like you to tell us why the business community and the chamber should support you in the upcoming election. And that goes to Mr. Mount to start.
You know, it's I'm actually a proud member of the chamber. I joined this year, but the company I work for has been around with the chamber a long time. I work for a locally owned company. We started it here. We had a lot of help from the chamber and this Small Business Development Center at Cochise College, and we've grown it to be a very, very wonderful company that's got nationwide impact. And it kind of goes to the heart when, if anybody wants it, well, it's posted online, my economic plan, which is if we build companies like this here locally and they start to flourish, no matter what market they go into, that money comes back locally. And so as our company's grown using this model, we've brought on more staff, we've brought on more people. And I'm proud to say, as the only candidate right now running for city council, I'm an employer. I go out and I've actually got quite a few of my employees that are here with me today. I'm a program manager. I've been running that same contract, a multi-million-dollar contract for 5 years. I know what it's like to go out and recruit good people to come here, to pick up roots, to come set down roots here in Sierra Vista. Look, I may not have been here since I was 3 years old, but I've convinced people who've got, 3-year-old children to move here. I know what it's like. I'm fighting for this city. And at the end of the day, what we have to do is we have to start executing an economic plan that's going to build real businesses so we can get back into that cyclic nature of the economy. The economy is a real simple thing to kind of look at if you studied it. You got firms and you got households. We need to create firms that have high incomes, disposable incomes, so they come and buy a lot of houses, and then they turn around and they buy stuff from our firms, all of our other local businesses. That's how we make this work. It's not rocket science, but we got to have the right people in place in order to make it work, and I'm that person. Thank you.
Mr. Blanchard.
Yes, I think the chamber knows that in the 16 years I've been on the council that I've supported the chamber, and I will continue to do so. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Benny.
Thank you, sir. My nonprofit organization has been a member of the chamber forever, and I actually reestablished our roots in there this year. And I am also a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I work with a lot of local businesses in my nonprofit organization in order to give back to Sierra Vista and give back to the community. The one thing that the Chamber brings to the table is there's another piece of that puzzle. You have the Economic Development Foundation that's looking at governmental contracts, big industries, big businesses. You have the Small Business Development Center. The Chamber's the place to give people an outlet, to show people what they can do, advertise for people, bring people together as a whole. They have 662 members, but they bring them all together. So if I have a glass shop for automobiles and someone needs 10, and I just replace their glass, I can direct them to somebody because they're also a member of the chamber. It's a one-stop shop, if you would. You go to the chamber's webpage, anything you need, you'll find. And you also know, wait, they're backed by the Chamber of Commerce, so it's a good business. So you have an issue with them, you go to the chamber, and that's how we solve problems with businesses, is having places like the Chamber of Commerce. They also do things like rewarding businesses. I got to go to the big glam this year and watch the home-based business that started about 1.5 years ago, win home-based business of the year from her and her husband, Mrs. Miss Diana Ricks. And I watched them struggle. They work tirelessly to build this business. Without the chamber, they're not getting their message out there. The chamber provides flyers once a month, which I'm proud to receive. And you get to place ads in the flyers. $90 gets you an ad. It goes out to 662 businesses, 14,000 people. That's a lot of publication. That's a lot of businesses. That's a lot of advertising. And that's what it's about. We can do everything we want. But we have to make sure we, as individuals...
Thank you. Ms. Ash.
The chamber should endorse me because I have been committed to reaching out to local businesses and members of the Chamber of Commerce. I have been committed to attending business at twilights. I've attended several ribbon cuttings, and I make myself accessible to business owners. You don't need me to tell you what your concerns are. I will do my part to reach out to you, and you can tell me what your concerns are, and you can be confident that I will bring your concerns to the City Council and I will work to resolve those issues. A business owner should not have to fight tooth and nail for a common sense approach, and neither should any of our private partners. I can continue my commitment to make myself accessible to you, and that is why the Chamber should endorse me. Thank you.
Mr. Wentz.
Well, as government policymakers is what the council is locally, I understand what policies do to businesses. I'm a small business entrepreneur. I understand what taxes do, what regulations do. So I understand what it's like, because you're a business owner. You may be a very small business owner. You need to make a profit every month. So every type of tax increase, that's going to pull money out of your work, out of your time. How do you have to work a week just to break even, 2 weeks? So I understand what that's like. So I know what business is about. So I know when you add an electric bill tax, I know what that means, not just for consumers, but for businesses as well, because your home is a small business in itself. You're running you need to have a balanced budget every month. So I understand what every little consequence is going to have from some kind of government policy when it comes to increasing your taxes or not, or some other regulation, because that's going to cost you money as a business person. So I understand how that affects you, and I will always vote on things that will keep the costs lower. Thank you.
Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Vega. It is a curious fact, not many people are aware. When we talk about expanding businesses in a community, a lot of people think their first thought is bringing a new large business into the community. But in fact, traditionally, the best economic drivers of growth in a community are the small and medium-sized businesses. There are a number of things that I will work towards to help these small and medium-sized businesses stay in business and be able to expand. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out to Ms. Mignon and the Economic Development Foundation. Absolutely brilliant program to help new startups, small and medium-sized that I'm just talking about. Provides in their business center on Bartoges West of 7th Street, provides an opportunity for new startups to have a place where they can operate, have a receptionist, have telephone space, have computer connectivity, with relatively low rent for their first year or two to help them get started. As city councilman, I will work with the chamber members. By the way, I too am a proud chamber member. Work with chamber businesses to negotiate some of the hurdles that sometimes are faced when they try to expand a business or start a new business. Sometimes we run into some development code issues. Variances can be approved. They'll run into some business code issues. Variances can be approved. And that will help the business to stay in business and expand. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our questions. So now we'll let each candidate have 2 minutes to make a closing statement, at which time you can either address something that was brought up earlier by one of your fellow candidates, or if you want to just make a general closing statement, that's fine as well, but you just have 2 minutes to do so. And Mr. Wentz, you get to start.
Well, since this is a business forum, I'm going to address business. Generally speaking, we need to make the town a little more business friendly, and that, to me, would actually currently right now start with getting rid of those red light cameras. I don't see that as people friendly, so it certainly couldn't be business friendly. If there's some kind of trap out on the highway trying to get $200 or $300 out of you every time, maybe you're just going to get some milk. That's not friendly at all, so it certainly isn't business friendly. So I'm definitely for getting rid of those cameras, and that, of course, should go on to the ballot. It's in its final process of getting on the ballot. For some reason it didn't pass. You don't want council members who put the cameras in when their contract comes up for renewal, because that's always a possibility. I hope they get rid of them at the ballot polls. But again, it comes down to, would you want to reward those who put the cameras in, subjected us to that kind of tyranny for the last couple of years? I say no. Same thing with the increase in taxes we've had over the number of years. The incumbents have increased your taxes several times. That to me is not business friendly, not people friendly. Quite frankly, I didn't think any of them were really necessary. Most of those are hidden taxes. So that's what distinguishes me from at least two of the candidates that were on the council and impose those type of things on the citizens. So I think if you want something different, then you should vote for me. Thank you.
Mr. Mount.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually very proud that in one of these days the red light camera debate will come up, and I've got a whole bunch of research just waiting on that one. But I agree with Tony Wentz, and I'm very proud that I worked with him to get it put on the ballot. It was a lot of fun, and we met 4,000 people who were more than willing to sign those signatures, so it was good stuff. Well, you know, the difference, and I agree, so look, this election is probably the most important election that we're going to have. We are facing 2,700 job cuts, and it's the top percentile of our earners. It's $70,000 jobs, $70,000 a year jobs. And, you know, we've had people on the council. It's not like this is the first council ever. And some of these people have been around forever. And again, if you just go back and you look at their voting record, I'll give you some statistics. From 2009 to 2010 to 2011, not a single no vote was cast by any member of the council. Not once. Not one time did one of those people say, no, I don't agree with this. Now, it started to pick up a little bit when Crosby got put on, and for some reason people tend to think if you haven't been recruited by the establishment, we're all now linked together. And I reject that notion very much so. But when you start to go down the line, you start to look at, there's been nothing holding this council back from acting. Strategic plans get put into place, and then you execute. It's time to move on, turn the page. Look, you've got some good candidates up here, but your two choices are pretty clear. You stay with the status quo, you're going to get the status quo. And that might even mean some of the people who are being backed by the status quo. Or you go with people who are independent. I haven't taken a dime for my campaign. I have not taken a single donation. I am unbiased, and I will work for you, and I've got all the experience and education needed to get the job done. Vote for Craig Mount. Thank you.
Mr. Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Vega. When I made the decision in 2000 to make Sierra Vista my permanent home, I immediately began to immerse myself in community service activities. Many of those focused on the young adults and children in the community, but such things as one of the local service clubs, the Sierra Vista Symphony Board of Directors, Limelight, which was a nonprofit organization providing training to in the performing arts to children and young adults, project graduation, et cetera, et cetera. I believe that my combination of experience on the city council and some of the commissions in the city, plus a demonstrated long-term commitment to community service, makes me, in fact, the best candidate here today before you. I do want to address one issue brought up by Mr. Mount, who was pointing out that when we get to the city council, so many of the votes appear to be rubber stamps. That, in fact, is not true. By the time we get to that point, we have gone through extensive process in the various commissions who bring the issue to work sessions where they're discussed in depth, and we've frequently had some pretty dynamic discourse. But by the time the resolution or ordinance came to the city council, we had already worked out compromises, worked out language that we all could agree upon. That's why it appeared, if you only watched the city council meetings, it appeared that it was a rubber stamp. It in fact was not. Please vote for Larry Hampton. Thank you.
Mr. Blanchard.
I'm proud of what the city council has done, particularly in the last year. I mentioned the three major streets that we resurfaced, but even more important than that, over in the Soldier area where you had the septic tanks that were all going bad, bad water flowing out in the streets. We went over in that area and completely redid that and put them on the city sewer system, and we put new streets in there. And I think the council has done a good job.
Mr. Benning.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the night. I'd be remorse if I didn't mention somebody. Horizon Moving, I mentioned Ms. Briggs. Horizon Moving also won Business of the Year, and I felt bad that I didn't bring her up. I apologize. I'm just going to end with the pledge. I don't have the most experience up here. I don't have the most education up here. What I do have, common sense, ladies and gentlemen. I see what needs to get done, and I get it done. I surround myself with experts. People like Mark from Small Business Development Center, Ms. Hollis from Economic Development Center. People that know what they're doing. I'm just going to make policies and start acting on plans that we have in place. We have a strategic plan. I don't need to create one yet. We just need to start following it and make sure these organizations we're partnering with follow it with us. So I'm going to end with a pledge to represent every single resident that calls Sierra Vista home and outside that does business in Sierra Vista. I'm going to be available day and night. I got me a cell phone with a separate number that's just for City Council. So someone can call me at 1 in the morning, I'm going to answer the phone, which I do now. If somebody calls me and says, hey, I can't pay my rent, I'm going to take them to St. Vincent, which I did today. And I got this gentleman unevicted from his house on Friday. That's what I do. If a business, or let's go back to what I do. If a children's organization says we need money, I turn to my nonprofit organization and we give them money. Last year we gave over $140,000 to Sierra Vista. So far this year we're up to $60,000. So that's my promise. You deserve someone that will work for you and communicate with you. I'm that person. I am William Benning, and please vote Benning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ash. You're last but not least.
Look, running for office is not easy. As may have been exhibited by my babbling today, I was not the most articulate, but I remain committed to serving the citizens of Sierra Vista. I have the personal connection to the city. I was raised here. I know what it's like to be a young professional here, and I think that's something that should be celebrated. I also have the professional experience. I've worked at the local level before, I've worked at the state level, and I've also worked at the congressional level. I know how to serve constituents because that was my job. A constituent came to me with an issue, may it be a state issue, a local issue, a federal issue, and I cut through red tape and I looked for ways to solve those problems. I will continue to do so, and I will continue to be committed to outreach no matter how much I babble. I am invested in this community, and I want to see a bright future. Thank you.
Okay, let's give the candidates a round of applause. I also, once again, want to thank the audience for coming tonight. Just to wrap this up, a couple of announcements for the chamber. We have we have a business at Twilight tomorrow, which is at Bright Star Home Health Care, and that's at 5 p.m. We also are happy to announce that we'll be sponsoring a mayoral forum with Mr. Mueller and Mr. Crosby. That's on Wednesday, August the 6th at 5:30, which also will be right here. And then we have a Meet the Candidates event at Pueblo del Sol, and that's not just the local candidates, but also statewide candidates. We've already gotten commitments from several gubernatorial candidates to attend that, and legislators as well. So encourage you to visit us online at the chamber, and also the video of this will be posted online for a full replay of this forum that you can view at your leisure. Everybody drive home safe. Thank you very much for coming.